Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is the Rebel News live stream on this, a Friday, June 11th, 2021. And look who it is. It's not Ezra. He's too busy. Sorry, folks, no refunds. And since it is Friday, as the saying goes, thank God it's TGIF, and thank God for my co-host. She is the she-devil with a sword. She is the Khaleesi of Northern Alberta. She is Sheila Gunn Reid. How you doing there, Sheila?
David, I'm great. And I just want to let you know that Justin does inform me about just the sheer amount of work and rehearsal that you put into your very careful introduction of me. And I just want to express how much I appreciate that on behalf of myself and Justin. Also, Justin, if you wouldn't mind, I can't see the Skype feed in my monitor. It's not a crisis, but, you know, I heard, oh, there's David. There he is, looking good.
You're so kind. And did you see what I did there? Doing that purposefully redundant saying, thank God it's TGIF. Did you get that, Sheila?
Yeah, you're extra grateful.
By the way, speaking of thanking God, let us take a pause right now for all the people in Ontario, because at the stroke of midnight, the patios opened up. And by the way, they did open up, albeit for only 2 hours, because last call is at 2 a.m. And you know what, Sheila? To show you what kind of pent-up demand there is for some semblance of normalcy, I understand most of these patios had a lineup. Can you imagine? It's midnight on a Thursday, and people are so desperate to actually sit down and eat food and drink a beverage like a civilized humanoid that they came out at midnight on a Thursday. I think that's incredible. And so the only question is, do you think this was a decision Doug Ford, the premier, brought to the table himself, or did he reach out to little 11-year-old Arthur to get advice? You know, the premier's new friend who the premier thinks is going to be the next premier of Ontario. Maybe he should just appoint Arthur premier, get rid of this silly democracy stuff, actually having him run for election. Yeah. But what do you think, Sheila? Is our premier getting talking points from little Arthur right now?
Is Arthur a real person, or is he like Joe Biden's corn pop? Are we like, is he real? Is he real, or is he just this like imaginary person? You said you were going to go out last night. Did you go out?
I was too tired.
I knew you wouldn't make it past the early bird special. I knew it.
Listen, when you're working out with all that humidex going on, it's not like Alberta where it's dry all the time, at least in the summertime. And well, I guess later on you get that minus 40.
Yeah, it's just dry. It's good. It's wonderful.
But you know what? But I'm glad I didn't, and you know what? You're not going to get a seat on any patio, Sheila, because not only is there this pent-up demand, there's that, Euro Cup soccer tournament where everybody's waving their European flags, and they're going to take up all the spaces, and so why can't they just open the restaurants too, right?
Right.
The indoor dining.
And do you our indoor dining opened up yesterday? And so naturally, I have to go out this evening and have a few beers with my girlfriends. Anyways, what do you have your restaurants? Have they turned their parking lots into patios? Because that's what happened here in Alberta when they limited them to just dining outside. They took out permits. They bought all kinds of outdoor furniture. They put up tents. They bought heaters to move outside. And then like 2 weeks later, Jason Kenney's like, oh, by the way, that's not safe either. So I guess my question is, have they taken over the parking lots?
Not just parking lots, Sheila, but actual live lanes of traffic. So where the right lane is.
Good.
And it's surreal. You're sitting, if you come to Toronto, I understand Manhattan is doing the same thing. you are actually sitting in a live lane of traffic that's being blocked off. So over to your shoulder is actual cars whizzing by. It's a surreal experience because you're really hoping nobody's being distracted. But, I don't know if this is going to be a story for us or not. I'm not going to name names or anything. There is a Richmond Hill restaurant that recently opened up. It is in a parking lot, a huge parking lot. And I went there for takeout last weekend. And I said to them, it's such a shame all your seats are covered in garbage bags. I guess that's what bylaw made them do, so you don't sit there. And I said, but what about setting up a patio in this parking lot, which is huge, Sheila? And they said, we went to bylaw. And they said, by the time we can approve this, it'll be the end of summer. Sheila, I could understand if this restaurant, was right next to the Oak Ridges moraine, this fragile ecosystem where maybe there's a species of salamander that might get extinct if you pave it over. But it's already asphalt. It's like, why would this take more than 3 months? Yeah, we'll get the process going, but by the time we're done, it'll be November. That is insane. And, I really hope I can get these guys to go public, but I don't think they will, because you know why, Sheila? If they make a fuss, it's not going to be a 3-month process. It's going to be like a 9-month process. And if there's anyone watching that is part of municipal standards, bylaw, licensing, anything like that, why would it take several months to approve tables and chairs on a piece of asphalt that's already there and paved, that doesn't have cars on it? Sheila, it just shows you this garbage phrase, we're all in this together. No, we're not. There is a class of people, the bureaucrats, the government, the bylaw, that have never missed an hour's worth of work during this pandemic. And then there is the private sector that is at their mercy, and it's a disgrace.
Yeah, what are these bureaucrats doing in the licensing and permitting offices? I guess maybe it's like the building office where you have to get building permits or whatever, even though you're not actually building a structure. What are they doing? What are they doing that this would necessarily take so long? A guy wants to put a chair in a parking lot. Where there's no environmental assessment that needs to be done. You don't need to call the hippies to come in and consult. You don't have to do a GBA, the gender-based analysis assessment. Just say, yes, okay, you can put a chair in the parking lot as long as you have a barrier to make sure that a car doesn't drive onto the person in the chair. Really, what goes beyond that?
Sheila,
except just wasting time and making busy work.
You're 100% right. If I purposefully tried to rag the puck for more than 3 months to make that decision, I don't know how I do it. I don't know. Yep. This is something that shouldn't take 3 months. It should take 3 minutes. Approved. That's it. And yet, I guess they have to justify their jobs. They have to do some kind of environmental analysis on an asphalt parking lot. Oh my God.
Government is the worst. It's absolutely the worst. But so is my Skype feed. Justin, I'm frozen up on my side. How's that for a segue, hey? Okay, good. As long as it's not frozen up on your side, I don't care. We should tell everybody what we're doing, though, because we need to remind them what platforms they can watch us on that aren't the censorship platform of YouTube. So this is the Rebel Daily News live stream. It used to just be on Friday, just hosted by Ezra Levant. David and I would host once in a while when Ezra was off doing what he does best, and giving news and commentary. And he would fly all over the world in the before times. And then the pandemic struck and grounded us all. And so we thought, you know what, there's more news than ever, despite what the mainstream media would have you believe. They are doing less news than ever, reporting less in the field than ever. For us, it's completely the opposite. And we thought there are so many things to talk about and things are changing day by day. Let's do our live stream every single workday. So we expanded the live stream Monday through Friday. David and I host Tuesdays and Thursdays, and incidentally, sometimes Fridays or whenever Ezra needs us to fill in so that he can do other things. Because what you may not know is he also is the head of Canada's largest independent news company. So the fact that he can do a daily show plus 3 live streams a week seems like a lot. Anyway, so David and I are hosting today. You can find us on YouTube. Now, sometimes Justin, is that still true? Sometimes we stream on the Clips channel, however, not today. Sort of. Okay. Well, anyways, we stream on YouTube. However, YouTube has completely demonetized us. You can't leave us a super chat. If you see an ad in front of our content, the rare ad in front of our content, the money doesn't go to us. We don't make any money off YouTube. But it is a good place to find us. And we don't want to abandon the 1.4 million people who watch us on YouTube. We want you to migrate away from the censorship platform of YouTube into one of the other platforms that, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, they don't hate you. And they probably won't censor you. So far, so good. We're streaming on Rumble. We also stream on Super U, where there's a live chat there. It's called a Super U Shout. And you can also catch us over on Odyssey. And on Odyssey, you can do something akin to a super chat. If you buy some of their library cryptocurrency, which I don't understand, you can donate a little bit of that to us to keep us going in the form of, I think it's called a hyper chat. Because we'll never take any money from Justin Trudeau. YouTube can demonetize us. They will eventually deplatform us too. But we will never take a penny from Justin Trudeau. We're not like the mainstream media who a year ago got a bailout and then now they're asking for more money because they still suck. So if you want to support us completely willingly, you can do that on Odyssey. But you can also donate to us on the main page too.
There you have it. And nor could we ever take a penny from anyone, Sheila, because I think 7 years ago we stopped manufacturing pennies. But
oh, that's right.
Yeah, so we'll make it a nickel, okay?
Yeah.
So let's get to it. Lots on the hopper, as always. This is a horse of a different color, I would say. This is a report from the fabulous Drea Humphrey out on the West Coast. It's about a police officer who is not ramping up on a power trip. We have seen videos from so many of our Rebel News correspondents, especially from Avi Yamini in Australia, where the cops are looking for any trivial reason to basically tackle, ticket, and incarcerate people, including, I think one of his most recent videos was a father and son in their SUV just eating, and for some reason, and I don't know the reason. That's why I have to say for some reason. I don't understand how that's a super spreader event. You should check out that video, folks. It's appalling in all the worst ways. But Drea profiles a police officer who said, you know, enough is enough, and I'm not going to take it anymore. And he has left. I'm of mixed feelings with this, Sheila, because this is obviously a cop with a conscience who we need in the police services of Canada. And your prophecy is coming true that you just said, I think on Tuesday, that you see the cops who see these petty incarcerations of people as being contrary to their oath of serving and protecting the citizens, the law-abiding citizens. And you predicted that they're probably just going to, out of frustration, leave. And unfortunately, like I said, a bit of that is coming true with this case. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, why don't we run a clip and check out what this police officer had to say to Drea.
April 24th of this year, I took my children to a kids' day in the park held by the Freedom Rally people who have been protesting in Saskatoon. There was a day there that they were just going to have children play in the park, have face paint, just to let the kids have a normal day because the past 13, 14 months haven't been very normal for them. I decided to take my children to this. Upon taking my children, there was a police presence, as there has been in other freedom rallies. However, this one was different because there was no actual speeches. There was nothing like that. It was just a day for the kids to just hang out and have a good time. So from that point, when I went there, obviously knowing the heavy police presence, I was photographed by undercover officers kind of walking in and amongst the crowd or just outside of the crowd. And these pictures were taken to my higher ups. What happened when I was taken to my superiors was I was contacted on Sunday, the day before I was supposed to go back to work. When I was contacted by my superior that day, I was told that I wasn't coming to work that day, and that as I had allegedly attended a children's rally. From that point on, they contacted me the next day saying that they wanted to, in order for me to come back to work, I had to fill out a questionnaire, undergo rapid testing in the morning before work, and sit inside the office all day for the remainder of the week. From then on, at that point when I was told that, I obviously refused. I said I wouldn't be doing those things as I was perfectly healthy and felt fine. From that point, my superior said, okay, well, you're disobeying a direct order. And what happened there was then I was charged under the Police Act for discreditable conduct of the major, the major level, as well as discreditable or insubordination of the major level, as I refused to do the rapid testing. From that point, I knew in order for me to go and fight this and do everything that way with my superiors, they would have to go through a public hearing, everything like that, and it would all be through the media. And I know how kind of the mainstream media is nowadays, and I know that they would just love to slander a cop who would be the one standing up to this stuff. I guess I should also tell you that CBC and CTV actually, it got leaked to them that there was an off-duty officer. My name wasn't leaked yet, but that means inside the police service, someone went to the media prior to anything going on. And it wasn't like I was at this children's event walking around telling everyone I was Saskatoon police. I just wanted to bring my kid to have a day in the park. Yeah. And basically that's where we came to this point. I wanted to resign because I don't believe in what police services and police forces are doing across this country and criminalizing good, normal people, the people who support them the most on a regular basis.
Wow.
Well, Sheila, another one bites the dust, unfortunately. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is exactly what we were talking about the other day. This is a good cop. He cares about the effect the pandemic is having on his community and children in particular, the most innocent amongst us, the kids who didn't ask for any of this, who don't get a say in what's being done to them. And all he did wrong was that he was interested in exercising some of his own freedoms, the freedoms that he's sworn to protect. And for that, he's charged under the Police Act and has to lose the career that he worked for. I actually talked to this very cop at a freedom rally in Edmonton a little while ago when I was out and about with my friend Daniel Day. And, he said the same thing. Basically, he's worried about who's going to be left in the policing ranks when the people who are there for the right reasons are run off the job.
It reminds me too, closer to Toronto in Mississauga, when Huff Gym illegally opened. I still get tongue-tied when I talk about a gym illegally opening as opposed to a drug den. But when that Peel Regional Police officer went to ostensibly serve them the summons, and what he did is he put his ticket book down and he went over and he actually hugged the gym owners and, of course, was promptly suspended. Thank goodness he didn't lose his job. But here again, the message is clear by whether it's the superiors or if it's the political masters behind the scenes. I mean, I say that, Sheila, because that date he mentioned, April 24th, that was the date when Mocha and I went to Peterborough to cover the Peterborough anti-lockdown event. And lo and behold, the guest speakers, PPC leader Maxime Bernier, Ontario MPP Randy Hillier, were promptly ticketed by the Peterborough police. And then lo and behold, weeks later, I got served with a summons. And I was charged under 7.0.2 of the Reopening Ontario Act. What a laugh that is, eh? Reopen. The place is locked down like Fort Knox, right? And it never said what it was. And finally, we got the disclosure just a few days ago. And my charges for practicing journalism, I committed evidently 2 offenses. I shook hands with Mr. Bernier, Mr. Hillier, and other people there. And folks, I'm not kidding. We'll have a full report on this. The officers saw me laughing. Yes, I was.
Chuckler. The chuckler strikes again.
The chuckler. Yeah. Note to supervillains like the Joker and the Riddler who are prone to guffawing. Don't go to the Democratic People's Republic of Peterborough. The coppers there don't like you laughing. The point I'm trying to make here, Sheila, is that what a dichotomy from this police officer who has a conscience, and he's the kind of guy, I can tell, death before dishonor. He resigns his career based on principle to the Peterborough cops who look for the most outrageous. I mean, can you imagine? Handshaking and laughing are finable offenses. These little creepy Karen cops in Peterborough. And unfortunately, who's leaving? It's officers like that, as opposed to the ones in Peterborough who should be dismissed. And again, what I struggle with, Sheila, because we can never find the proof to this, is it the law enforcement, chiefs, the supervisors that are demanding this, or is it the politicians behind the scene? Because to me, I think there was a political element. Hillier, Bernier, those are politicians non grata now. And they are to be dismissed and ignored and even vilified, whether it's by those in government or those in the mainstream media. And the fact that I was giving them an opportunity to tell their side of the story, that implicates me as being on the wrongful persons list. Sheila, that is banana republic crap. And we're seeing it right now in Canada.
Well, before we pass the buck off to the cops' political overlords, I think the problem starts with the upper echelons of policing. It's the chiefs. They are political animals. They are no longer cops. And we don't have to look much further than Bill Blair to see this manifesting. Somebody with progressive political aspirations being barfed out of bad policing and failing upwards into liberal gun-grabbing MP. That's what's happening right now, and we're going to see more of that. When I look at this cop, and I see this good cop standing for freedom, he would also likely be sanctioned because he refused to take a knee with Black Lives Matter. Yeah. That's the problem here, is we've got a whole raft of cops knowing, look, I'm going to get in big, big trouble if I don't take a knee with Black Lives Matter, even though technically on paper, not that I care. I only care insofar as there is this unequal application of the law. But Black Lives Matter, those gatherings over the summer were technically illegal. But the cops went there and showed their deference to those illegal gatherings. On the flip side, this cop has lost his job because he joined in a freedom rally. Yeah. And there's the problem here.
And Sheila, you raise a fascinating point with the bending of the knee with Black Lives Matter rallies going back to last summer that happened all over the world, as a matter of fact. I wonder, was there any noted incidents in which a police officer just stood at attention and didn't bend the knee? Because, like you said, I wonder if he would be reprimanded for that. But what would be the reprimand? He's not obligated to bend the knee for anyone. He would be actually doing his duty by standing there, not participating in a protest. But I think you're right. If that had happened, and I don't know if any incidents of that occurring, I could see that officer being reprimanded.
For sure. And it doesn't even have to be in a formal way. It can be pressure in a way that you can't do your job effectively anymore, that you are showing up for work and you're not sure if the people you work with in this deadly job have your back anymore. We've seen police officers en masse leave the force in the United States, where municipal politicians have sort of given in to the Black Lives Matter defund the police movement. And they just become so demoralized that they cannot put on their uniform and their gun and their badge and go to defend a community that so hates them, that they just leave the force. And now there's these huge policing deficits. And what happens when you have a policing deficit? Crime skyrockets. Yeah. And then it starts a cycle in these largely minority communities where the Black Lives Matter people move in. They say, defund the police. The police say, you don't want me here. That's fine. I quit. And then crime rates go up, and the Black Lives Matter activists move on to the next community and ruin the next community. Yeah. And it's always minority people paying the price.
And meanwhile, some of those Black Lives Matter leaders are living in $10 million gated mansions. They're not in the communities that they're allegedly going to bat for. It's appalling. Mm-hmm. The other thing I want to point out, this was a family-friendly day in which, bring your kids out, let them pretend, let them party like it's 2019, so to speak. And, Sid and I, in March, went to a similar one held on Parliament Hill in Ottawa, Sheila. And I want to give a shout out to the Parliamentary Protective Services. Parliament Hill has its own police service, PPS. And they did not shut anything down. And this was a great event. There was magicians and clowns and face painters and stilt walkers, and kids were having fun kicking a football around Parliament Hill. And I spoke to some of the officers, and boy, did they get it. They said, Parliament Hill is exactly for this. It is to have a protest. It is to embrace your free speech. Pandemic be damned. And I thought, wow, it's so good to see an entire police service, which is what the PPS, that truly gets it. And I just wish they were around it. In fact, many of them, and we didn't out them, of course, we don't want them to get in trouble, actually during their time on Parliament Hill removed their face diapers so they could breathe fresh air. And I mean, that's almost like an act of rebellion. That's the opposite of taking a knee for Black Lives Matter. So I just want to give a shout out to PPS, in which the same exact event was occurring in March in Ottawa, and there was no charges. They were there ostensibly in case those rats at Antifa were to show up. They were there to protect them from that kind of nonsense. So good on you, PPS.
I've got to give a similar shout out to the Edmonton Police Service and some, not all, but some of the sheriffs who work at the Alberta legislature. I know for the last little bit, Daniel Day and I have been covering the freedom protests there, and then the Battle for Canada worship rallies that have been happening there. And the police presence is so minimal, and they don't issue any tickets. They very well could, but they never do. And I suppose it would be hard to start issuing tickets literally in the shadow of the Sky Palace. I think the optics would kind of suck. But they've been really good, really hands-off. And mostly they're there just in case Antifa shows up, which they don't. So, again, while we've got some rotten police services like Calgary, and again, not all cops, but there's a few of you in Calgary. Edmonton has been pretty hands-off, which is saying a lot because maybe it's because I don't live in Edmonton, but I view it as a progressive hellscape with an NDP Green mayor. And, the cops are doing a good job there.
And you know what it is, Sheila? Because you contrast Edmonton's police service to Calgary's, and it's literally just a few hours down the road, same province, right? Same culture. Yep. But that's what it is with police services. There is a culture and it can be a good culture and it can be a tainted one. And in Edmonton, I would assume, and I'm not an expert on the Edmonton police force, Sheila, I assume the culture there is good so that they don't, force the envelope when it comes to shutting down protests, versus in Calgary, shutting down a live lane of highway and dragging off a pastor just for basically what I think was street theater, to show the fear and intimidation tactics this force is capable of. I think it all stems from who the senior officers are and what they allow to happen and what they shut down. And Edmonton and Calgary, two, like I said, two major cities in the very same province, but night and day.
Well, and you'd think it would be the other way around. Calgary's sort of like the cowboy conservative city.
Exactly.
And Edmonton is the progressive hellscape government city. And yet the police forcing cultures are completely reversed. And credit where it's due, again, no fan of Mayor Don Iveson, but he seems to be a little bit too busy putting up solar panels in our beloved River Valley to worry about ticketing protesters, where in Calgary, Mayor Naheed Nenshi is really anti-lockdown protester. He really doesn't like those people. He's taken to the national media to call them white supremacists or whatever it is. And Mayor Don Iveson has sort of shut his mouth about it. So, again, the bar is really low, but credit where it's due.
Well, in fairness, Sheila, now that Keystone XL was officially canceled some 3 days ago, maybe Mayor Iveson is onto something. Maybe Alberta's going to need a lot of solar panels to answer your energy needs. Yeah. I know that's not viable. I'm just being facetious here. But like I said, I spent 2 years of my life in Alberta when I first started out in this journalism shtick. And to me, to see these far leftists get into positions of power in the 80s when I was there, Sheila, it was unthinkable.
It still feels unthinkable if you're not in a big city. Like it feels like you're still living in the again, before times, like the 80s, 90s, the swinging 2000s where everything was great here in Alberta. It still feels a little bit like that when you're not in the city. But then when you go in the city and you're like, oh yeah, there's a university here. Everybody's crazy. Everybody's got hair that tells me they have daddy issues. Like it's a mess in the cities. Justin wants us to get to some of these chats.
Yes, please do.
And Justin, I only see 5 on my screen. So maybe we're missing some, or maybe you have yet to send me some. Oh, that's it. Okay, perfect. Hey, Justin said that's it. That's all the chats we have. If you're on Odyssey watching right now, throw us a library and, let's get some chats going. Or Rumble, make some chats. Oh, these are just the ones Justin picked. Can you guys post something interesting so Justin picks it? Because I like reading the chats.
Yeah, what do you want to bet? Most of these chats have the word Justin in it so that he can do that electric guitar, which I still don't understand because he doesn't play any musical instruments.
There's no Justin shout out in here, so I should have taken that
wrong.
bet. M. Bumpy LOL says the chuckler strikes again. I love it.
Maybe I should do the Frank Gorshin thing, like the Riddler, get some green spandex suit with a bunch of
costumes,
question
David,
marks.
No costumes.
Yes, that's right. Channeling memories of Transcat, R.I.P. Go ahead, Sheila.
Odyssey, an Odyssey hyper chat from Revelator 2. Tell David his tie is loose. Tisk tisk.
Oh.
Is it loose?
You know what? Whoever invented neckties, there you go. Is that better now? All you fashion critics out there. By the way, I'm going to do some research on the necktie. Whoever invented this, really, I know it looks formal and businesslike and all that, but it's really painful, especially on hot days, and it's like having a noose around your neck, literally. So, maybe I have to go back to the mock turtlenecks. What do you think about that, She-Devil?
The mock turtlenecks. Are you trying to look like a 1970s James Bond villain? David, we don't have like a dress code at the company, obviously speaking. Like I'm dressed down most of the time. So I'm pretty sure it's not necessary for you to wear a necktie every single day. I know it looks good. You like to look sharp. You're a sharp dressed man. But if they're literally choking you to death, I'm pretty sure you don't have to wear one.
Mr. Producer noted Ezra can't wear one because I steal all of Ezra's ties. That's not true. I borrow a few, but I always put them back on the rack. I'm looking at them right now. And we have the sharpest viewers ever, Sheila. People know when I borrowed one of Ezra's ties, which to me is like supernatural that they would be that attentive to details. But this is one of my own.
You know what, though? That means that our viewers are paying close attention, and that puts extra stress on us to get stories right.
That's right.
And get every single fine detail perfect, because they are absolutely going to notice. They notice the ties.
Incredible.
Okay. We've got a Rumble chat from Chronic Bud 99. It has to go through the gender study. I think we're talking about the parking lot patio. Has to go through a gender study to make sure the parking lot isn't going to hurt anyone.
Yeah, and by the way, speaking of gender and policing, one of the funniest things I came across in our beloved colleagues' neck of the woods, Coburg, and I'm speaking of Tamara Ugolini, the police chief there makes note of his gender pronouns, he/him. In case you thought a man with a beard with a male name was a she, her, or a Zeezer, or a spirit unicorn. Like Sheila, to me, it's not a big deal, but in a way it is. It speaks again to the politicized culture in a police service.
Well, they want to show that they're allies, right? But I want to know that they're also an ally of mine, too, as in they're not going to put me face down on the concrete because I'm not wearing a mask outside.
That's
like,
right.
I get why they're doing it. They want to show, like we're everybody's friend, but I'm pretty sure you're not going to be my friend. Like, that's the sense I get.
I just think if you have a male name like Bruce, such as Bruce Hawkins, the spy employed by the City of Toronto to take pictures of journalists giving unfair coverage, and you have a beard, and you're quite obviously male, do we really need the he, him?
I don't know the rules. I have no idea. Oh boy, these are going fast, Justin, now. We've got a Rumble chat from Share21. Agreed. Mixed feelings myself. There are cops and people in healthcare who don't believe the nonsense, but they are between a rock and a hard place. Yeah, we are. But on the other hand, my pen just flew off the desk. On the other hand, there are more healthcare professionals also speaking out, and I think maybe that's kind of because the pandemic is over and it's hard to keep the narrative going now that it's like officially over. I saw a statistic, I think Ezra tweeted it, that during the pandemic hospitalizations were down. Like and they kept telling us, no, we have to shut everything down so we don't overwhelm the hospitals, but year over year hospitalizations were down, like low.
And Sheila, I can add some anecdotal information to that. During the pandemic, a couple of my family members had to go to the emergency department of the hospital in Richmond Hill, and it was like almost going through a drive-through, like in and out in like about a half an hour, which is surreal because you can wait for 6 hours in the waiting room of an emergency, easy, and I know that for a fact. And we brought this up, didn't we, when Dr. Samantha Hill of the Ontario Medical Association on live TV, CP24, made the offer that for all you COVID skeptics out there, just go to the ICU unit of your local hospital and see what a war zone it is. And then I applied to do so, and oh no, come on. Dr. Hill didn't really mean it. She was speaking privately on live TV, viewed by tens of thousands of people. So when it comes to the don't tell me, show me part of how busy these hospitals are, we tried to get in, folks, on the advice of Dr. Hill of the OMA, and we were denied. So what does that tell you?
Yep. They just say things, right? Like they literally just say things. And if you're like, yeah, I want to follow up on that, they're like, whoa. It's because they're not used to skeptical journalism at all. Like they know at this point in their career, you could just like pull things out of thin air,
Yep.
say them, and the mainstream media are not going to say, sure, let's dig down just one layer deeper. They know that's not going to happen. So when you suggest, okay, I do want to go to the hospital, they don't know what to do. They can't even imagine that somebody pushed back.
Amazing.
We've got a Rumble chat from, oh boy, Doe Colt 0000. You Canadians are crazy going around shaking people's hands. Oh my gosh. God.
And laughing.
Yeah. Chuckling and shaking hands. What do they call that? Pressing the meat or whatever they call that? Shaking hands.
I just wanted to give the jiggle with the giggle, Sheila. That's all.
We got a super you showed from Carl, says Calgary's going far left. However, they do have an election coming up municipally, and maybe they have a chance to save themselves from the last, I guess it's been 8 years of progressive politics in the city, maybe longer.
Do we have a front runner for mayor there, Sheila? Like, what's the gossip all about in terms of who might actually become the new mayor in Calgary?
Not really. I mean, it's kind of early goings. There's a couple of fringe candidates, and then there's one conservative. I haven't seen any progressives present themselves in any meaningful way that would even put themselves on my radar. So we'll see. Things will heat up. But I think, based on the success of some of the grassroots conservative organizations in Calgary, when they got the Olympics stopped, that they were up against the city, the sort of the province, the IOC, and they all came together and stopped the Olympics, saying, this is crazy, we can't afford this. We're in a major recession, get out of our city. Which is kind of something you don't hear anymore. People like not wanting the Olympics, but good on Calgary. And that all was like grassroots. They had no money and they fought it all back. And some of those same groups are starting to organize to support conservative mayoral candidates. So I'm excited to see what happens in Calgary going forward.
Sheila, can you imagine the madness of pitching for hosting an Olympic Games or the World Cup of Soccer tournament during this pandemic and all the economic misery that we're going through? And yet, for so many of these politicians, these are vanity projects. They don't care what the cost. I go back to the 1976 Olympics. The most infamous quote of Montreal Mayor Jean Drapeau was that the Olympic Games could no more run a deficit than a man could give birth to a baby. And there was this great Toronto Star editorial cartoon by Duncan McPherson, and it's Mayor Drapeau, 9 months pregnant with a baby carriage with triplets in it, running the 100-meter dash. So, because I think it wasn't until sometime in the 2000s, the Montreal Olympics, going back to '76, were paid off. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I mean, right now in Calgary, we've got Jeremy Farkas. He is the renegade conservative on city council. Routinely, he gets censored, and it seems as though all the progressives and the mayor are constantly trying to shut him up. And so I kind of like his attitude, because when people try to shut me up, make me go away, that's how you get more of me. And so he's decided to run for mayor. Jeff Davison, if I recall, he's sort of a center-right conservative also. But those are sort of the two higher profile people involved in Calgary. I'm interested to see who will be the NDP Liberal candidate. But those two are the only ones that anybody's paying attention to right now.
And is there a little red flag there, Sheila? Not based on the qualities of these two candidates on the right, but the fact that if they split the vote on the right and there's one singular NDP-esque candidate, you got another Nemshi situation, don't you? Yeah. You're
not wrong to say that. You would also have another Rachel Notley situation on your hands. So the Conservatives in Calgary need to sort of coalesce around their favorite guy, and they should do it early.
I agree.
Okay, let's keep going. Odyssey from Agatha. Sheila and David, do you think Jason Kenney will really open Alberta fully, ever? Yesterday, we moved into stage 2 reopening, which means that our churches and our retail places all are at 1/3. However, Grace Life Church is still seized by the province. We're allowed indoor dining. So things are moving in the right direction. He hasn't pulled the rug out from under us quite yet. But based on 16 months of experience, I will not believe it until I'm actually experiencing it, because he tied it to vaccination rates. Vaccination rates are ticking up. I think we're at 67.5-ish% of the population age 12 and over are at least have their first vaccine, and we have to get to 70 to be fully reopened. They've opened up the second wave of, like, for your second dose of vaccination. That's happening now already. But also now they're saying, oh, the vaccination rates are slowing down. So we're already talking about reasons not to reopen. However, given that the Calgary Stampede is slated to go ahead and there's a ton of money thrown behind the Calgary Stampede to shut that down, boy, that would be career ending for Jason Kenney. And I mean, like, seriously career ending. That is something that if he has to go back on that after promising it and after, telling the rodeo community and the business community who rely on the Calgary Stampede that it is going to go ahead, the fact that he's now hitched his wagon to that, I don't know if there's a way out of reopening for Jason Kenney. So for that, I'm kind of glad.
And Sheila, speaking of hitching wagons, correct me if I'm wrong, I understand that when the Stampede takes place next month, I think it's in July, it's usually early July,
yeah,
there's not going to be chuck wagon races? Isn't that the marquee event of the Stampede?
Yes. Yeah,
well,
and a lot of that has to, so a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are not qualifying races.
Oh,
because those were all canceled. So how do you qualify? And that's the problem with what's happening in rodeo, is because all the local rodeos were not allowed to go ahead. Like, everybody thinks, oh, like the little know-nothing rodeo in the middle of nowhere, who cares about that? But those are all rodeos that help you get to Calgary. You just can't, like, grab your saddle and saunter into Calgary or saunter into the CFR or the NFR in Las Vegas. You have to qualify to get there. And if the qualifying rodeos aren't happening, how do you get there? And not only that, I mean, in rodeo, you're just making enough money to get you to the next rodeo. You don't make money. You might keep your head above water, but you don't make money unless you get to Ponoka and Calgary and the CFR and the NFR. Those just haven't been. So one of the reasons was there haven't been these qualifying races for the chucks for them to go ahead. But the drivers are saying, we'll just come. Just let us come. We'll run our own heats. Just let us come. And they're still saying no. So I don't really know the excuse now for not letting the chucks go ahead when you're letting the other events go ahead. And I realize that, yeah, some rodeo cowboys have been in the United States and they've been holding these smaller rodeos with people in the stands to act as qualifying events. But, if we can go ahead with the bulls and saddle bronc and calf roping, we can go ahead with the chucks.
Yeah, listen, Sheila, in May of 1985, I sauntered into Little Smoky Lake, Alberta, and rode a bull called Oscar for 2.5 seconds, which exceeded everybody's expectations, by the way, folks. Let's put it this way. I arrived in a Honda Civic and I left in an ambulance. So where there's a will, there's a way, okay?
Oh, David. That's Justin's favorite story, by the way. Speaking of Justin, we've got one library hyper chat from Odyssey from Agatha who says, shout out to Justin.
I told you.
And another hyper chat of one library from Agatha saying, why haven't we heard from O'Toole lately? I think we did. I forget what he was talking about the other day. Probably Keystone XL, something relatively safe for conservatives to talk about. He was coming out and talking about that. But I mean, it's fascinating how the conservative movement, by and large, is completely silent, save for a few, on the issue of civil liberties altogether. They just are not. They aren't saying a word. And I think it's because the civil liberties infractions are coming from conservative politicians. It's coming out of Manitoba. It's coming out of Ontario. It's coming out of Alberta.
I would even argue, Sheila, what kind of name recognition does Aaron O'Toole have? He's been in power as the leader of the opposition for so many months now. And I think, we did this experiment with Andrew Scheer where I went down to Yonge Dundas Square and we had a professional photograph of Scheer, so we weren't playing any games, in terms of a grainy image or whatever. And basically I said, do you know this man? And ironically, during part of the interview, the Jumbotron at Yonge Dundas Square was showing an Andrew Scheer news clip. So here was a 5-story high Andrew Scheer behind the picture of Andrew Scheer. I think it was like 1 out of 10 knew who he was. The most embarrassing guess was it was a young lady who said, "Oh my God, he's that serial killer," meaning Paul Bernardo. who's doing
I shouldn't laugh.
And the thing is, if I replicated that experiment, you know what? I think I'm going to do it. I'm going to replicate that experiment. The news peg we'll wait for is when the election is called, and I'll just go to the square and say, "Who is this guy?" And Sheila, if it's 1 out of 10 in terms of recognition, I wouldn't be surprised. And that's really sad.
I bet you if you went down there with Kamala Harris's photo and Aaron O'Toole's photo, I bet you 75% of the people would recognize Kamala Harris. But I don't think very many people would know who O'Toole is. And I suppose that's a failing of the media as well, right? They literally won't shut up about Kamala Harris. Go ahead.
How about Aaron O'Toole and just Kamala, the late, great WWF wrestler?
Exactly. Exactly. Speaking of, maybe we'll talk about it real quick before I finish up the rest of these chats. I popped it up on my screen here. Sorry, Justin, I'm looking at global news on this story, and I can't see what you've brought up because my Skype feed froze 50 minutes ago. But Alberta today, Jason Kenney made this big announcement that they're giving a security grant to protect religious and cultural organizations against hate crime. And this is in response to the attack in London. This includes places of worship, temples, synagogues, community centers, Indigenous friendship centers, ceremonial facilities, and monuments. And the funding can be used for things like security and technology improvements, as well as staff training. And Jason Kenney said, "We tragically witnessed this week religious and ethnic minorities in Canada remain at risk of being targeted with hate-motivated crime. These cowardly acts of bigotry have no place in our province. Alberta's government stands shoulder to shoulder with these communities and is proud to deliver on our election commitment to keep them safe." And they'll get up to, I guess it's $500,000 available this year, and $10,000 to assist with security assessments and training, and $90,000 for the purchase and installation of, this is my favorite, security infrastructure such as alarms, gates, motion detectors, and security systems. So basically what they have going on down at Grace Life, but a little different, because it'll be to protect themselves against hate crimes, as opposed to what's happening at Grace Life, which is a province protecting Christians from going to worship. And I thought this was an interesting and a slightly tone-deaf thing for the Alberta government to do. And don't get me wrong, I appreciate what they're doing here. I think it is important to protect our religious institutions from hate crimes right across the board. My problem is that this government is walking around waving the flag of protecting religious freedom and religious institutions when they themselves have put 3 pastors in jail and confiscated a church. Who will protect our religious institutions from the government here?
Fantastic point, Sheila. Yeah, because what happens when the hate crime isn't coming from some deranged individual, but it's coming from a level of government?
Alberta Health Services.
Yeah.
Alberta Health Services bigotry.
Yeah, and like you said, I guess Grace Life, in the large scheme of things, they're now ahead of the curve. They've got that security fence. The only problem is just one hitch, right, Sheila? The congregants aren't allowed on the other side of the fence. So even though they continue to worship, and thank goodness for that. Yeah, but you know what? To me, again, Sheila, this is about politicizing a heinous crime, a tragedy, and shame on them. This shouldn't be done. It is the kind of virtue signaling you typically see from the left, but now the right's doing it too. And as
go ahead.
Oh no, and maybe that's one of the reasons, as we discussed earlier, that when you look at the 3 lowest polling premiers in Canada, it's Kenney, Ford, and Pallister, all Conservatives. Supposedly.
Yep, exactly. And that's because they've decided that they all need a new base.
Oh, yes.
This is really something else to see. This, and again, I want to stress, I appreciate that they're doing this. And they're not playing favorites when it comes to who gets the security grant and who doesn't. And I realize they're doing this in response to an attack on a family in London. But if something happens to the folks at Grace Life, and I've been there, I've seen people come out to protest the church. If you see some of the online commentary directed at the church, they're called a hate cult. They are, treated as though they are like Waco. If something happens to them, how much of that has to do with the government rhetoric directed at them as these dangerous super spreaders who don't care about their fellow man over these past months?
Oh, and Sheila, I've experienced the exact same thing. Remember last month at Church of God in Elmer, Ontario, when there was a demonstration across the street by members of the trans community of Elmer. Elmer's 7,000 people. As far as I could determine, the trans community is 2 people. And when I was covering that, and remember, this is not me trespassing on private property. I'm on a public street. 2 members of the Elmer Fudd Police Department came over because the transgender people called them and told me that if I continued filming, I would be arrested. And again, I'm in a public place and they are there doing a demonstration, ostensibly to get coverage. The world's upside down, Sheila.
Yeah, I mean, I was at Grace Life, I think it was live with Ezra, and a guy with like a pro-Satan sign drove by and was yelling at women and children.
Wow.
And, these people get whipped up into a bloodlust because they are going to the University of Television every single day, listening to this fear-mongering from their TV about how everybody's going to die if you don't wear a mask, or if you want to go to church, then you're killing your neighbors. And then they see the heavy-handed tactics the government is taking with these churches, which somebody who's not a deep critical thinker would think, okay, well, the response is the response that it is because the threat is so deadly.
Yeah.
It must be so bad that it justifies jail and confiscating property and fencing the church away from its congregants and driving them underground. The threat of the virus must be equal to the enforcement measures the government is taking, when clearly it's not. And that's my concern, is that, when I see people saying, confiscate the church, lock it up, burn it down, how much of that is driven by what the government has done to Grace Life?
And I've lost count of how many times I've said this question to you, Sheila, but again, what is Jason Kenney? What is the ostensible policy reason here in him doing this?
Well, it's in response to London, obviously, at least the new grant is, but I can't get over them making this announcement today while Grace Life is being forced to sue the province for the return of their building. Yeah. That's what's happening. They are suing the province right now because even though we've moved into stage 2 reopening, they still can't get their church back. And this is the announcement the province is making today. Where are your communications people, Jason Kenney's government? What's wrong with you? This is ridiculous.
Sheila, you're so right. That is the hypocrisy of this announcement, given, what's happening on the ground with Grace Life and the 2 other pastors that, have been incarcerated. And I just go back to the time in which Jason Kenney was an MP in the Stephen Harper government, and he was all about religious freedom. But I guess it doesn't. I guess that was for faraway places, not within his own home province of Alberta.
Yeah, Tim Stevens is still locked out of his church.
Yeah,
2 congregations are driven completely underground. If we're going to make this announcement about protecting diversity in religion and religious freedom and protecting religious organizations from hate crimes, could we please just at least turn the church property back over to the congregation, and at least these 2 congregations? Maybe could we do that? But no, we're playing favorites here.
Too much to ask, as always. And Sheila, I cannot believe it. The clock on the wall says 1 o'clock. I thought maybe, but we have lots of chat. So as far as all our topics, once again, that's a fool's errand, and we're going right to the chats, which is important, of course.
That's right. We've got a Rumble chat from Alberta separatist David. Neckties come from swords in the Middle Ages. I did not know that.
I don't understand the connection, though. I could use a sword to cut this necktie.
I'll have to get my Google on after we get off air. Budgie13 says, David reminds me of the reporter Columbo. He just needs to add the line, one more thing. Ezra calls David Columbo all the time.
Columbo was a detective, and I loved Peter Falk as Columbo back in the 70s. And it's so surprising. I'm getting yelled at all the time. Get off this property. I'm calling the police. And I go, I understand. Just one more thing. And it works.
I know. I think it's funny when you're interviewing people and they say, oh, you can't record me. I don't want you to interview me. And you just look at them and you say, oh, okay.
Yep.
And put the microphone back in their face. Because they can walk away, right? Like it's not like they're chained to you. They can go away. You don't chase people.
That's the amazing thing, Sheila, that they claim an invasion of privacy, but they sought me out. and
they say stuff like, I don't want to talk to you, but then they literally won't shut up. Like they just keep talking.
Whatever has to be done, Sheila, to get that other side of the story, right?
And sometimes you don't even have to do anything. You just have to let these people talk, like that crazy teacher that you met at that memorial in Toronto. You don't have to even talk to them. They're just letting it all out and telling you exactly who they are. In
her own words, she even gave us the headline for our story. I don't care about ISIS. There's your Toronto District School Board Teacher of the Year. She wasn't Teacher of the Year, but the fact that she has a job there is terrifying.
It's a bit much. Okay, we've got a hyper chat of one library from My Room Agony. Alberta may be partially open now, but those of us with brains will never forget what they did to us. Holding us hostage with experimental vaccine quotas is pure evil.
Well, that is Jason Kenney's biggest threat, is the elephant-like memories of Albertans, because I am sure, Sheila, we discussed this a couple of days ago, his only ally in recovering from all these fumbles is the passage of time. And it's another 2 years before there's an election in your province. And that's an eternity in the political timescape. And I think that's what he's counting on. And to me, that's risky business.
Yep. Okay, let's keep going because we're past time. We've got Justin warns me, and he says this may get us in trouble on YouTube. So I'll just read it, and then we'll just keep going, and I'll click through the link later on. We've got a hyper chat of one library from Celtic Mutt. He's the guy with the red bubble shop that has the Mediterranean sticker that I keep meaning to order. He says, Sheila, here's why no one should ever get the vaccine. And I'm not going to click on it, but I will click on it after. Hyper chat of three libraries from Wendy Walk or Wendy Wah 1K. Have you seen the Liberty Coalition Canada's interview with Dr. Peter McCullough? What's Up Canada has also interviewed this doctor as part of his doctor talks. I have not. But I did have a nice chat with my friend Dr. Roger Hodgkinson last night in Edmonton. Hyper chat of One Library from My Room Agony. Thanks for standing up for Christians when nobody else will. Rebel. And look, it may seem like we're playing favorites with Christians, but I think, we're not an explicitly Christian network. Ezra's Jewish. There's a whole host of people who work behind the scenes that are Jewish. We've got all different kinds of Christians. There's like the Catholic faction, and there's the other faction of Christians. And more than anything, I think we just believe in religious freedom. That's why we knew mosques were open, but we never publicized the names of the mosques that were open because we want them left alone. I want them to be open. I want the Sikh temples to be open. I want the synagogues to be open. I just wanted the equal application of the law. And as it turns out, it was only Christian churches that were locked up and confiscated.
100%. I mean, I went out in December. We were tipped off there was a Scarborough mosque that might have been violating the attendance. We never identified that mosque. And when we spoke to officials at the mosque, they said, and I'll take them at their word, that they were letting in 10 at a time. You pray for 5 minutes, you're out, another 10 comes in. So if that is the truth, they were complying with the law. So we didn't out them. And because I want, as Sheila does, all religious institutions to be open and experience religious freedom.
Yeah, I want every single religious institution to be left alone by the state. My church, somebody else's church, the mosques, the synagogues, everybody. I don't want the state meddling with what they do.
Yep.
We've got a super you from Fraser Bow. That's Fraser McBurney. He's a Fight the Fines recidivist. He says, David, which knot is your favorite? Windsor bow 4 in a half knot? Bolo ascot? David, what's your favorite? How do you tie your tie?
You forgot one. Clip on. No, but you know what? I don't even know the names of these knots. I mean, Sheila, if ever I was at sea, I'd be the first guy overboard. I just spin this thing around my neck and hopefully it comes out right. So I'm sorry, Fraser. I'm not that educated when it comes to the fine art of tying on a tie.
Do you leave it on the hanger with the knot tied and then slide it off and on like a noose?
I don't do that. I'm not that incompetent.
Oh, my daughter can tie him. Yeah. Justin says that there's a tie like that right in the studio with him right now. My daughter can tie a mean tie. Okay. Yeah, my daughter can tie a mean tie because of cadets. She can just whip one up perfectly because they have to be perfect for cadets. So
I totally believe that. If
you need someone to teach you, she can help you.
Okay.
We've got a Rumble chat from M. Bumpy. Victoria, BC, canceled Canada Day ceremonies. Yeah, I saw that. What's that horrible mayor there? Lisa Helps. I think she's a Trudeau Foundation scholar, or she's involved in the Trudeau Foundation, or at least she was for the longest time. I know that should shock everybody, right? Yeah, she's just probably the worst mayor in the entire country.
Yeah, is that any surprise? I mean, the reason why we have a Canada, and by the way, I don't call it Canada Day, folks. I refuse to. It's Dominion Day. I am not going to allow Justin Trudeau's father to rebrand our beloved national holiday, and I won't get into all the reasons why. But Victoria, when you think of it in terms of uber wokeness, they were ahead of the curve. Weren't they amongst the first cities, Sheila, to get rid of the Sir John A. Macdonald statue? You know, the guy responsible for this thing called Canada. The idea that Dominion Day celebrations are canceled, well, to her, I'm sure that's just an expression of white supremacy or whatnot. That's how insane the left has gone.
I think if I recall correctly, and I could be wrong, but I think I'm pretty sure that I'm right. She was one of the mayors in British Columbia who wanted to sue the oil companies for climate change top up her municipal coffers. Yeah.
So much, and much like Premier Ford's getting words of advice from 11-year-old Arthur, she's probably getting her words of advice from Greta Thunberg over in Sweden.
Yeah. At least Greta's real.
The children shall lead, Sheila.
Greta's real, though. I've looked at her. She's not imaginary. I think Arthur is imaginary.
We'll never know.
Chronic Bud 99, after the stampede, they will call a fourth wave. It's quite possible.
Yep.
Unless the government-sanctioned rodeos are not super spreader events, but the independent ones like Ty Northcott's rodeo, apparently that's a super spreader event, even though we're like a month out of the rodeo and everybody's fine. Yeah. A Super U chat from Carl, or sorry, that's a Super U shout from Carl, will never vote UCP again. I think there's a lot of people feeling that way. Hyper chat of One Library, Stoned Gamer, says only villains enjoy wearing masks. Justin rocks. And we've got a hyper chat of one. Sorry, go ahead.
A lot of superheroes wear masks too, except, guys like Superman. And I don't know how he pulls that off, Sheila. It's like one moment it's Clark Kent, glasses come off. Hey, where did Kent go? Superman, how did you get here? Has that ever been explained? Anyways, I diverge.
David, I got to tell you, I get recognized when I'm out and about in the world, only if I'm wearing glasses.
So maybe there's something to that.
It's true. Like if I'm shuffling through the farm supply store and I'm not wearing my glasses, it's fine.
Wow.
But if I have my glasses on, someone will be like, oh, you look familiar. I think I know you. They can't quite put their finger on where they know me from, but I will get noticed if I have glasses on.
There you go.
A hyper chat of One Library from Roxanne. When asked where the money was from for the vaccine lottery, Manitoba's premier answered, from your 2-year-old. Yeah, we saw that yesterday. Insane. Sorry, the link is from Facebook. New lottery for the vaccinated. Where's that $1 million money you asked for? Yeah, I think we clipped that yesterday and put it up on the Rebel social media pages because, they're bribing people to take a vaccine today with money they don't have so that, your grandkids can pay for it, for them to bribe people now. It's not bad enough that we're already forcing this immoral debt for all this out of control spending on kids, but we're making them pay for the bribes now too. Yeah.
In Toronto, it's free ice cream, by the way, Sheila. I'm not making that up.
That's such a Chester molester thing to do. Anyways, we're all caught up now. It's 11:12.
What a note to end it on. Anyways, folks, thank you so much for your generosity with your chats there. And a special thanks to Justin, of course, and Sheila. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I'm signing off. That is Sheila and I will see you on Tuesday. In the meantime, stay sane.